Hello everyone, and welcome to Feng Jicai on art, on history, folk arts, and writing. We're very happy to have you with us today, and the event will begin now. So get comfortable, grab a drink, and we'll get started, shall we? Let me just give me 1 second while I admit a person to the room. Well, first of all, we'd like to thank some of the VIPs that have made today possible. So let me just load that up for you right now. We'd like to thank, of course, the esteemed Feng Jicai Lao Shi, a contemporary author, artist, and cultural scholar, and the namesake of the Feng Jicai Institute of Literature and Art. We also like to thank Julia Lovell, professor of modern Chinese history and literature at Birkbeck, and the author of works such as Maoism, A Global History, and The Opium Wars, Drugs, Dreams, and the Making of Modern China. Next, we'd like to thank Dr. Katie Hill, Program Director of the MA Modern and Contemporary Asian Art at the Sotheby Institute of Art in London, and of course, the wonderful Xue Xinran, author of The Promise and the Good Women of China, and the chairwoman of Mother Bridge of Love. Thank you all for joining us today. Next, we'd like to introduce you to some of the organizations that have made today possible. Among first is the Feng Jicai Research Institute of Literature and Art. Zhu Shenghui, Associate Professor of the Research Office of Modern and Contemporary Chinese Literature, and the Director of the Academic Committee of Feng Jicai Institute of Literature and Art of Tianjin University, has very kindly put together a quick video in which he introduces the institute. Let me just play that for you right now. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Great.
Welcome to visit Feng Jicai Institute of Literature and Art, Tianjin University online. Famous for science and engineering, Tianjin University is the first university in modern China. Our institute is a representative of the humanistic spirit and poetic campus of Tianjin University. There are many cultural places such as museum, art gallery, archive, and library, where the students and faculty could enjoy themselves all the time. Talking about teaching and research, we have Chinese Modern and Contemporary Literature Research Office and the 3 national level research centers. Chinese Woodblock New Year Picture Research Center, Chinese Traditional Village Protection and Development Research Center, Chinese Inheritors Oral History Research Center. Batch after batch of our graduates are working in the cultural field, domestic and overseas. Over the past 16 years, our institute has formed a clear academic majors and disciplines, has a large number of solid research achievements, has extensive academic exchanges and cooperation at home and abroad, has its own unique temperament and beauty. We are looking forward to the best future with all of you, my friends.
Wow, doesn't that look amazing? I've personally been there, and it is an amazing place, I must say. Anyway, next, we'd like to invite Dr. Hill to give a quick introduction to the Sotheby's Institute of Art. Dr. Hill, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you. And I just want to say a huge thanks to Feng Jicai and his institute for the incredible organisation, but also to Sinoist Books today for this amazing event. So thank you. Just a very brief introduction to Sotheby's Institute of Art and the MA in Modern and Contemporary Asian Art. Sotheby's Auction House was founded in 1744. When Samuel Baker, an entrepreneur, occasional publisher and successful businessman, held his first auction. Today at Sotheby's Institute, we emphasize a keen understanding of an object's value and history, a spirit of inquiry and scholarship, business acumen and innovation that build on these foundational values. The Institute offers educational programs for professionals, pre-college audiences and graduate students seeking experience in art business and an understanding of the global art economy. And we especially value learning through hands-on experience and situational context. And our areas span from Asian art, contemporary art, luxury, logistics, art law, and valuation. And since its founding in 1969, Sotheby's Institute has built an extensive global network of diverse individuals, and there are 8,000 alumni around the world. So the master's degree in modern and contemporary Asian art focuses on the history and development of Asian art in the 20th and 21st centuries, including a large component on East Asia with China, Japan, and Korea, but also including material on India and Southeast Asia. We look at the relationship of art movements in the modern period alongside the development of art discourse in the West and its place in the global world. And we take students to key collections, important galleries, as well as study trips to Europe and Asia.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Katie. I'm sure SIOA offers a very, very unique experience to all their students. And finally, my name is Daniel. I'm the marketing manager here at Sinoist Books. Sinoist Books partners with reputable Chinese publishers to bring the best of Chinese fiction and literature to an English-speaking reader. We aim to create greater understanding of Chinese culture and society and provide an outlet of ideas and creativity for the authors, some of the country's most talented authors. We recently published Feng Laoshi's Su Shi Qi Ren, which the illustrations of which you're seeing kind of dotted around in the marketing material of this event. And we also recently published A Looking Glass World, both of which is set in Tianjin and talks about the exciting things that have happened in that city's history. Anyway, now with the introductions out of the way, we'd like to have Julia Lovell, who's worked very closely with Feng Laoshi before, to give a quick introduction into Feng Laoshi's life and works and her experiences with him. Julia, can you hear us?
I can, absolutely. Well, I'm honored to have been invited to introduce Professor Feng Jicai this morning. Professor Feng has been a major figure in the Chinese arts world since the 1980s, so for many decades now. And in the late 1990s, when I was searching for a writer to focus my master's dissertation on, Professor Feng was an obvious choice. And in 1999 and in 2000, he very kindly and patiently allowed me to interview him for my master's and doctoral research on Chinese literature. So I just want to give a quick overview of Professor Feng's remarkable career. As is well known, there was a thaw in culture which took place in China following the death of Mao in 1976. And Professor Feng threw himself into key literary movements and debates. This began with scar literature. Also, as writers absorbed new influences from outside China, including modernism, 现代主义, Professor Feng experimented with new literary forms and language. This writing and thinking was sort of represented in cultural movements of cultural reflection and cultural root seeking. And again, Professor Feng contributed a huge amount of creative writing on this theme, including one of his literary tour de force, one of his jiezhou, the 3-inch golden lotus, Santun Jinlian. And this is an extraordinary historical novel, ostensibly about the Chinese obsession with bound feet, but it's also an extended reflection on the strangeness, even abnormality of convention and tradition. And also in the 1980s, he started arguably one of his most significant literary projects. He collected interviews with many participants, perpetrators, and victims of the Cultural Revolution to put together a groundbreaking volume of documentary literature, recording extremely diverse experiences of this decade. And these interviews were with ordinary people, not political leaders. And without Professor Feng's extraordinary efforts, these voices would never have been recorded by history. But Professor Feng is far more than a writer. He's a true Wenhuaren, a person of culture. He has been an active editor in important cultural journals such as Yishuzha, The Artist, and Wenshui Ziyoutan, Free Forum for Literature. In addition to his important literary work, he is a prolific and famous artist, a collector, a curator, and a passionate advocate for preservation of the heritage of his hometown, Tianjin. He absolutely embodies the best of the Chinese intellectual tradition. He has devoted his life to creative work, but also feels a powerful sense of intellectual responsibility in his cultural work. So in the earlier part of his career, he worked on helping China come to terms with the painful legacies of the Cultural Revolution. But then since China began rapid modernization of its built environment in the 1990s, Professor Feng has extended what in China is called a youhuan yishi, a kind of intellectual worrying consciousness. He's extended this sense of responsibility to the cultural and environmental effects of modernization, especially with regard to the preservation of built heritage in his hometown of Tianjin, which in the 19th century became an extraordinary international melting pot of architectural styles. If anybody in the audience wants an introduction to the multi-talented Professor Feng, I recommend wholeheartedly the wonderful volume that Sinoist Books produced in 2019, Faces in the Crowd in English, in Chinese, 苏诗奇人, brilliantly translated by Olivia Milburn. And this book brings together so many of Professor Feng's talents and strengths. So the book provides 36 vignettes of local life in Tianjin from the 19th and 20th centuries, beautifully illustrated by Professor Feng himself. So this book really encapsulates his literary and visual creativity and passionate commitment to Tianjin. But you're all here to listen to Professor Feng and to Katie, not me. So I will stop here and hand back over to Daniel and Professor Feng.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Katie. It's amazing to hear some of the kind of work you did with him before. Right. Now that you've gotten to know him a little bit more, maybe we should like to get the man himself to speak a bit about his work at the Institute. In the interest of time, we have pre-recorded a video to show you. Let me just load that up now. Give me 1 second.
年是要印的，现在中国印刷已经早不用雕版印刷了，现在还在用雕版印刷的只有木板年画。因为木板年画是中国一个重要的文化遗产，也是现在目前依然活着的一个民间的艺术，它的产地非常多，遍布中国大地的鼎盛时期的产地有100多个，现在还有大小40个产地，还在印刷，还受到老百姓的欢迎。在本世纪初的时候，就是2000年左右，我们对中国的大小产地进行了抢救性的调查记录，给每一个产地都制作了文化档案，把所有的重要的年画的传承人都给他们做了口述史，把这些材料全部制作了数据库。我们现在已经准备好了向联合国申报世界文化遗产，而且也做好了全部背诵的一些资料。下边就给大家看一看我们申报世界文化遗产的申遗篇。
This is an ancient form of picture. It is printed on engraved woodblocks and then colored by hand. It is very popular and highly cherished by the Chinese people. At the New Year's time, people will go shopping, and the thing on top of the shopping list is the New Year picture. It is put up on the doors and the walls. This picture, meant for the New Year celebrations, is called Nianhua in Chinese, New Year picture. This New Year picture tradition dates back 2,000 years, at least to trace its origin. Its earliest form was a picture painted on the door, intended to scare demons and ghosts away from homes and pray for security and harmony of domestic life for the coming year. Later, woodblock printing and paper-making techniques were invented in China, which made it possible to produce the picture in large quantities, and thus it became accessible to the public. By and by, the New Year picture had evolved into a New Year custom for the Chinese people. By the Song dynasty of the 12th century, New Year picture stores were found in towns where all kinds of pictures for adornment were available. However, the people who produced the pictures were not professional artists. They were virtually farmers, doing farm work in the fields most of the year and making pictures after the crops were harvested in autumn. The New Year picture is an art involving multiple techniques for drafting, block engraving, printing, coloring, and picturing, and all the techniques are executed by hand. Even today, the tools for the making of the New Year picture are the same as the ones used for block printing in ancient times. The ink rubbing technique of picture printing goes even further back in history, and it is still being used by present-day New Year picture artists. The puhui technique used in the frescoes of Dunhuan grottos is also preserved in the printing of the New Year picture. The themes and techniques of the New Year picture are passed on to the next generation, either by personal example or verbal instruction, or through pithy rhymed verses. In their respective places where they live and work, the New Year picture artists are highly esteemed for their moral virtue. In the society where farming is the predominant mode of production, the New Year is an important festival, and there's an overwhelming demand for the New Year picture. Sometimes you find villages where almost every household is involved one way or another in the making of the picture. There are now over 100 New Year picture producers scattered across the country. As China is vast in area with various natural conditions and diverse cultures, every New Year picture producer has its own distinctive style. The colors used for the New Year picture are all homemade from local plants and minerals. As the customs, housing styles, and aesthetic tastes vary from place to place, every New Year picture producer has its own favorite, unique genres and forms. Customarily, throughout the country, the New Year picture is put up in the later part of the La Yue, the 12th lunar month. But as for the rituals observed and the position the picture goes to, different places follow different customs. The predominant theme of the New Year picture is deity worship. In ancient times, people depended largely on the mercy of nature for farming business. They created out of imagination deities for the worship of the sun, the earth, and natural phenomena as an expression of their wish for healthy and prosperous lives. Beautiful and virtuous women and chubby and healthy kids are symbolic of domestic felicity. Popular operas, mythological tales, and historical allusions are represented in the New Year picture. In ancient times, a New Year picture is, so to speak, a television set on the wall. The New Year picture is the spiritual image of the Chinese people. Over its long-term involvement in history, the attractive Chinese New Year picture has exercised its influence on some neighboring countries. Japanese ukiyo reflects marked influence from the Gusu version of the New Year picture. Since the 17th century, the important museums of Russia, Japan, and some European countries have collected over 5,000 Chinese woodblock New Year pictures, a considerable number of them masterpieces. For the past 100 years, New Year picture scholars from various countries have held exhibitions and conferences and published numerous monographs on the art of the woodblock New Year picture. Under the impact of modernization and urbanization since the second half of the 20th century, China's agriculture social structure has rapidly fallen apart, and it has had severe adverse effect on this traditional art form. In order to conserve this traditional art and make sure it is passed on, Chinese cultural scholars, together with grassroots volunteers, launched a drive to salvage and protect Chinese woodblock New Year picture. There are nearly 1,000 people involved in it, including scholars from Japan and Russia. 10 years' endeavor has paid off, and New Year pictures archives have been established for all the producers across the country. A database of Chinese woodblock New Year picture has been completed. A Chinese woodblock New Year picture website has been set up and is now open to the public, which is instrumental in disseminating the knowledge about this important cultural legacy. Since 2006, 18 of the New Year picture producers, such as Yangliuqing, etc., have been inscribed on the list of National Intangible Cultural Heritage by the Ministry of Culture of China. Many New Year picture artists have been awarded the title of representative bearer of Chinese folk culture. They enjoy the care, sponsorship, and support from the state. Some important producers have established New Year picture museums. Chinese woodblock New Year picture, having bordered on the verge of extinction from the adverse effects of modernization, is now showing prospect of revival. Today, the ancient engraved woodblock is no longer used for the printing of books. But there remains one thing in which it is still being used, and that is the New Year picture. Chinese woodblock New Year picture is the gem of Chinese culture and the precious living legacy of the culture of mankind. It deserves to be cherished and passed on forever and ever.
That was amazing. I mean, I loved the New Year pictures at the end, such vivid colors. Before I hand off to the next segment, I've just been informed by our partners that we now have over 50,000 people on the Sohu streaming side. Thank you all for coming. Just an aside, thank you all to those friends for coming on the Chinese side. And thank you for joining us. And we hope that you're enjoying the show. Right, up next, we have Dr. Hill. She has prepared a brief presentation on Nianhua paintings mentioned in Feng Laoshi's video. And she also prepared a quick slideshow, which I'm just gonna pull up now. Dr. Hill, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant. Let me just load up your presentation. Just tell me when to go to next slide, okay?
Okay, thanks.
1 second. Brilliant.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm afraid I can't possibly match the incredible sort of breadth of knowledge of Professor Feng. So just to say from the outset that I'm slightly daunted by giving this talk, but a very brief insight into a research project that I did a number of years back, which took me into a specific area of Nianhua in Wuchang in Hebei province. And it was a project that, could I have the next slide, please, Daniel? That was really looking at the idea of heritage in the context of 21st century culture in China. And I particularly was interested in thinking about the survival of rural practices, because my main field is contemporary art, so that I've been looking at urban centers such as Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and this is very much took me out of this urban sphere into a very much a rural side of culture. And I was interested in looking at how these cultures are surviving through the site of a little museum that had been set up in Hebei. So I don't really want to go into detail because the film really showed such a rich view of Nianhua and its historical development. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. So this little museum, I was looking at the idea of how Nianhua was attempting to be revived, and you know, the sort of structures between the very few number of really farmer producers in China in the contemporary period, and how the Nianhua was sort of entering into a museum representation in order to sort of promote and preserve it. And of course, one of the people who's done this most incredible job of preservation is Professor Feng. And so, you know, again, we go back to his amazing role in this whole sort of thinking about the structures of culture in China and how to preserve these traditions which go back centuries, if not millennia. So next slide, please. So I did visit this workshop within this Wuchang Nianhua the museum that was set up to preserve them, and they had some printmakers in a workshop who were able to sort of show the techniques. Next slide, please. Which, you know, again was shown very much in the film, so I'm not going to dwell on them too much. Next slide, please. So there were makers within this workshop who were able to demonstrate and produce prints with the techniques of design, cutting, and printing using color, and then laying on the color, and then printing with these different craft aspects of printmaking, which are still preserved in a very similar way today. Next slide, please. But in contrast to this, what I was really interested in was seeing how much this existed within a rural context, and was able to interview this printmaker who was very much struggling against the younger generation, having left to work in print shops in urban centres, on the edge of urban centres, and the villages were emptying out. And so it was fascinating to see his situation as a very much one of the surviving rural makers in the heart of rural Hebei near Hengshui, which is only about 3 hours from Beijing, and yet, you know, you couldn't get more of a contrast between this mass urbanization and this very, very rural situation. So that's what I was kind of interested in looking into. And on the left, you can see some of the prints that he produced on his own, in his own house, but also the situation, the kind of context of this making within a rural context of him as a farmer, very much in the heart of the countryside. Next slide, please. And, you know, the film showed the gods. We have these domestic, these are quite, in a way, very, very early forms of prints that have still held their same style, very simple, red, green, yellow, black, very, very simple color palette. And the idea of the calendar, the rural calendar, which was a very detailed sort of understanding of at what point you plant certain seeds, at what point the weather is going to turn, and these are all very much sort of marking rural points in the agricultural calendar, which was also incredibly interesting because they sort of go back to very, very early forms of connecting the new year with the seasons and the pattern of work that it was entailed in the countryside. Okay, next slide, please. And then this was at the back of his own house, hanging the prints up on these poles and pasting them, and the sort of tools in the workshop, just showing the context, which is extraordinary really to see this still there. But I think that in the last 10 years since this project, things have moved on, and I think there's, due to people like Professor Feng, who's incredibly important role in this, there has been a much bigger revival of some of these rural craft traditions. Okay, next slide, please. So I just want to briefly mention the print center of Yangliuqing, the town near Tianjin, which of course is the well known also as a print center, in which these large numbers of villages in the early 20th century were still active, producing thousands up to millions of prints. So incredible sort of change from the early 20th century to the end of the 20th century and the early 21st century. And the also what was mentioned, this status of Chinese Nianhua, New Year printmaking, becoming part of, acknowledged as a World Heritage category under the name of intangible cultural heritage. So this important acknowledgement of this category in the in the global domain of sort of threatened cultures, if you like, and the need to preserve them. Okay, next slide, please. So just to really show the difference in this much more sophisticated print, showing a sort of depth of field, use of perspective, a sort of a much more sort of, you could say, middle class interior of leisure, of women, of children, and the sort of details within this interior. So the Yangliuqing are very much a sort of sophisticated a form of printmaking which came out of the Tianjin as a port city, taking in all these influences, but also retaining this visual aesthetic of the mid to late Qing. So very interesting, and I think, as I say, my expertise is not nearly on the level of those we're in the company of today. So I'm going to leave it there, but I just want to thank everybody because I've greatly enjoyed being part of this talk.
Thank you so much for that, Katie. That looks like an amazing trip, definitely. And I think now that we've heard so much about the Yangliuqing and Nianhua Chinese sculpture, I'm sure everyone's like would love to ask some questions. And I think it's about time we opened the exchange up to the floor. And I know, Katie, you've given me a couple of questions you would like to ask Feng Laoshi yourself. Shall I ask one of them for you, or?
Oh, please do, Daniel.
Okay, great. I mean, one of Katie's question is, how has local culture responded to the mass urbanization and construction in recent years, especially in a place like Tianjin?
这个中国现在这个社会发展很快，天津作为一个中国的一个大城市，它高速的发展，这个发展的时候，它像一个人一样，它要快速的跑。这个时候，它的需要的是什么呢？一个是需要很好的体质素质，另外一个需要力量。那么，一个城市的素质和力量从哪儿来？我想，一方面当然离不开它的经济的实力，离不开经济的实力，还有一个很重要的就是文化的力量。一个城市文明的高度，一个城市独有的文化，也就是它个性的文化，所能到达这个高度。这个个性的文化，城市独有的文化，离不开它的文化遗产。因为遗产是自己的，是吧？它有自己的独有的东西，是其他的文化不能代替的，所以遗产就变得特别重要。遗产特别重要。那么天津市作为一个大城市，1000多万人口，那么一个大城市，这个大城市，它在当今的发展，它实际有2方面是要特别注意的。实际的城市现在也是很重视这2方面，一个是它的城市本身的传统，它的遗产的保护。这个是这样，中国现在的文化遗产，从2006年。我们进行了全面的普查、记录、整理，进入我们最后建立了一个国家的文化遗产的一个名录。这个名录跟联合国教科文的名录是一样的。那么它是分4级：国家1级，地方的3级，省市、县一共是4级。现在已经进入名录的是10万项，是10万项。国家是超过1500项，超过1500项，可以说现在，中国大地上几千年来的非物质文化遗产，基本上清楚了。就是说，民间的民俗、音乐、美术、舞蹈、曲艺等等，基本上清楚了。这个遗产必须要保护，保护的方式非常多，包括对每一项文化遗产的艺人。我们叫传承人，他的保护，这是一方面。还有一个就是新文化，这个文化必须发展。天津市最近这个10几年来建立了一个文化中心。天津市这个城市在古老的是它是一个商业城市，从码头商业文化发展起来的。以前历史上城市的中心都是商业中心。最近的10几年来，天津建立了一个新的现代的一个文化中心，包括博物馆，
有历史、文化、艺术等方面的博物馆，一个是大的一个剧院，就是可以演歌剧、交响乐、戏曲的一个歌剧院，一个是图书馆，还有一个美术的一个展览中心。这都是现代的建筑、现代的设施，这是现在天津市文化的一个中心地区。那么一方面把力量放在我们对历史文化遗产的保护上，让历史的文明能够延续下去；另外一方面要发展现代文化，让历史文化和现代的文化能够接起来，它的精神、它的精髓能够接起来，这是城市发展一个总的趋势。
Thank you so much for that, Feng Laoshi. I have another one here from one of our networks on the back end here. And it's another question is, how important are rural traditions in China today and how are they being preserved?
这个村落因为中国是一个农耕的大国，从考
So
古学
speaking
上
of the
看
rural
到这个
areas,
中国的
China is an
农
agricultural
耕的历史
country.
是7000多年的历史，
From archaeological
7000多年
perspective,
的历史。
we have 7,000 years of
是
rural
一个传承
tradition.
有序的，
So
不同
this
各
kind
种
of
时期的
tradition
农村我们现在都可以
has
看
been
到。
passed on.
现在中国现有的农村是200多万个，
Currently,
200多万个，可以说我们
we
是应该
have
讲最近的
2
几十年
million
改革开放，才快
countryside.
速地进入了一
In
个
recent decades,
现代的
after
一
the
个
reform and opening up,
工业社会
we
这
have
么样的一
moved
个时
into
代。我
an
们农耕的文明积
industrialized
累得很
world,
久，积累得很
and
久。这个我
our
们的民族的记
agricultural
忆
foundation
最
has
深的
been
记忆
passed
是
on.
在农村里边，我们的文化的根是
And
在农
we
村里。
have our
一个我
impression
们民族
deeply
的
rooted in rural
民
areas.
族的气质，民族的文明，
Our
我们道德
spirit,
的准则，
our
我们自己民
civilization,
族的
and
习惯，
our
还有
ethical
我们
standards,
非常灿烂的多
as
民
well
族的
as
文
our
化，都
traditions
在农村
and
里
our
边
culture
有形的和无
are
形
all
的存
deeply
在的。
rooted in
所以
rural
我们必须
areas,
要在这个
both
快速
visibly
变
and
化，因为
invisibly.
最近这20-30年
So
来，中国的
under this
社会的变化
rapid
太快。
transformation, in these
我们
past
从
2 to 3 decades,
我们有
we have
360
transformed
万
quite a
个
lot.
村落，到了2010年的时候，我们还有270万个村落，就是10年里边，我们失去了90万个
In 10
村落。
years' time,
那么
we
在失去村落的
lose
时候，很多的文明的记忆就不复
approximately
存在了。所以我们必须
900,000
要把
tribes,
村落里边
and
最有
that is
价
the
值的
loss
村落，
of tradition
最
and
典型的、
civilization.
最有代
Therefore,
表性的
those
这样的村
valuable
落要保护
tribes
下来，
and
要保护下来。同
those
时，
with
我们要快速
culture
地
and
进行研
tradition,
究
we
整
need
理。
to
另
preserve
外呢，
them,
刚才我说，
and
要
we
使
need
我
to
们的
do
传统文明
research
在
in
今
a
天不但
very
活
fast
下来，
manner.
还能跟现代的文明衔接上。这是我们
If they pass on till
主要
today,
做的工作。
they
我
can
们
correlate
最近
with
这个
today's
从
culture.
2012年， 我们国家建立了
From
中国传统
2012,
村落保护的
China
项目，我也是
established
这里的
the
工作者之
Traditional
一。
Tribes
我们
Protection
这些年来，
Project,
从
and
我
I
们
am one
的
of
传
the
统村，我
workers
们
there.
的历史村落里边整理出来
These
的
days,
进入国家名录
we
的村落
have
是6819个，这6819个都非常有特色，非常美，非常美，历史文化都非常
19
深。我们要全
tribes
力的给这
that
些村
has
落
been
做档案，
listed in the
做
catalog.
村落史，
We
要
have
给他们做
documented
保
them
护的一些规则，
and
这是我们的工作。这
set
工
up
作当然
rules
很
to
难，
preserve
但
them.
是我
These
们
are
必
our
须做，
works.
因为如果我们
These
这代人
are
不做，我们的后
quite
代人就
difficult,
见不到了。
but we have to do it because if we don't,
谢谢
our
您，
future
谢谢您。
generations can't
Thank you
see
for the
that.
answer. I see there's one in the chat right now raised by Xinran, and apologies, my Chinese is going to be atrocious on this. 请问那些杨柳青年画的匠人是否有足够的继续人？是否有社会的支持？
应该讲这个社会的支持， 政府和国家的支持，现在应该讲是力度越来越大。因为什么？因为人们对文化遗产的重要性，尤其文化遗产未来的重要性，看得越来越重要。可能前些年比较注重它现在的重要性，比如它能够旅游，能够给现在的人们能够带来一些利益，可能看到现在的重要性，这是我们忧虑的。因为作为知识分子，知识界更看来它未来的意义，因为知识分子非常重要的是前瞻性，非常重要的前瞻性。看来它未来现在呢，随着这个知识分子的这个发生，社会整个文化程度的提高，对文化遗产的价值和价值的认识这个提高，现在越来越多的人，特别我高兴的是年轻的人参与进来了。现在有很多的年轻的志愿者，来做的文化遗产保护。他们在这种市场经济的这个环境里，不把这个个人的利益放在第一位，而把这个文化的命运看得更重要，这是一个好的现象。我们要推动这样的一个社会的一个进步的一个趋向。
Thank you for your answer. Thank you for your answer. I have another one here that's another question here that's been forwarded to me by Katie. What kind of local government support in Tianjin is available to develop cultural industries such as the museum sector and art historical research?
这个支持是从政府来的。
Speaking of this kind of support,
是主要是两个方面。
we can speak that from two perspectives. Most of the museums
以前博物馆是收
are
费
free
的，
now.
现在作为重要的国家旅游景点的，有的时候它
And
需要收
now
费。
they also
收费还不完
have
全是
fees.
经济收入，
not
更
just
重要就是控制
for
你的人流。
economic
你
income,
比如说
but
故宫
also
博物
to
院，
control
你比如说敦
people
煌研究
that
院，
comes in.
这样的
For
它是
example,
太
the
知名度太高了，
museums in Beijing
文化价值太高了，
and Dunhuang,
太难得一见了。
because
所以
they
在
are
旅
very
游的
precious
假
in
期的时候，
cultural,
人们都往
and
那去。这个
people
现在
would
不好，
come
因为太
there,
多的人在里边光呼
and
吸
there
都
were
有
too
影
many
响。
people.
所以呢需要收
So
费。
we need
大
to
部分
have a
公立的
fee.
博物馆是不
But
收
most
费
of
的，
the public
向公众开放的。这还是
museums
从
are
社会文明的角度
free.
这个
That is
考虑
from
的。
the social
这是一个
cultural
方面。
perspective.
还有一个呢，
And
现在的
another
政府
perspective is that
各
for
个
the
方面，
government,
就是说政府的每年的科研的，就是国家要给予资助
we
的科研
supported
项目里
many
边，对于博物
research
馆、对
projects.
于文物、
For
文化
the
艺术的
museums
研
and
究的项目
arts,
是越来
we
越
have
多，
more projects.
是吧？还
And
有就是
for
我们大学，
universities,
我们
for
比如说
example,
我们
our
学院，我
institute,
们支
we
持
support
老师
the
们、
teachers
学生
and
们
students to
做他
do
们
what
有
they
兴趣
would
的。
like to do
另外，
and
一些他们有
what
发现
they
的、有价
find
值
it
的这
quite
样的科研的
valuable.
题目。
And I
其实
think
我觉得更重
what's
要
the
的还
most
是知识
important
分子
thing
本人
is
的
the
他们
intellectuals,
对于
their
文
own
化的责任。
responsibilities to the
如果有这
culture.
种责任感的时候，说话，钱多钱少这都
Money
好像不是问
is
题，
not
因
the
为这是
issue
我们一
because
起
that's
做
what
的。
we need to do.
谢谢您，谢谢您。看来这个咱们这个 event 已经有一点那个过时间了，所以咱们这是最后一个问题吧。Let's make this the last question because we're overrunning a tiny bit on time. Is there still preservation of Tianjin's old buildings from its interesting cultural history as a colonial port city?
天津是这样，天津是一个中国一个文化的名城。这个名城有一个很重要的特点，就是
您听得见吗？
听见可以说吗？
可以说，可以说。
这个城市有很大的特点，叫华洋杂处，就是说它一半是本土的，一半呢是外来的。因为这个城市很独特，因为天津是最早的开辟殖民时代的时候开辟租界的城市之一。天津的这个开辟殖民时代的时候，天津是从1860年开始的。1860年的第二次鸦片战争，英法联军当时占了天津和北京， 所以天津就开府有了租界，最早是英租界，然后是1860年转1年，1861年是法租界，然后呢，到了1900年，就是义和团八国联军那个时期，天津最多有9个租界，9个租界，这个租界天津市也是比较早的结束租界的，天津市是1945年结束租界的，中间殖民时代是85年，这85年因为租界，各国都要把自己熟悉的生活习惯了的一种建筑方式带进来。那么从今天从历史文化角度来看，天津市这个城市的面貌是非常丰富、非常驳杂，是非常有自己的特点，是吧？也非常美丽，是吧？那么殖民时代作为一个城市史的一个特殊的时期，它具有见证价值的，也有具有文化价值的这些建筑，当然是我们保护的范围，是保护的范围。所以大批的殖民时代的各个租界的一些历史的建筑，已经列入了天津市和国家的文物保护的重点单位。重点单位都是要挂牌的，这和伦敦一些历史建筑外边挂一个蓝色的圆的牌子，是吧？我也看过狄更斯的故居，外边也挂了一个牌子，是一样的，是一样的。它现在也有的是居民还宿，重要的房子是要拿出来作为故居，把它重新陈列，可以参观。不同的时代的文化名人的历史的政要的，是吧？各式各样人物的科学家的这些故居，这些重要的历史事件发生的一些地方，都保护下来，也有的开辟成小型的博物馆。这个是现在呢已经进行了几次的文物调查普查，最近这几年刚做了新的一次全国的文物普查，天津也做了，也扩大了它的保护范围。一个时代越是往历史上发展的时候，越重视它的历史的遗产，因为历史的遗产只能越来越小，越来越小。但是能够证明一个城市，它现代了，也最重要的一点，看它对历史文明的态度。它对历史越尊重，它的文明的程度越高。
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, Feng Laoshi, that was amazing. That was really amazing questions. I think in the interest of time, we're running a little bit of 10 minutes over time already currently. So it's but I see there's still plenty of questions in the chat. So what we'll do is we'll consolidate them at the end, and then we'll maybe do a Q&A round to email out later, if that's possible. But if you'd like to find out a little bit more about Feng Laoshi's work, we have, again, 2 books available. One, Faces in the Crowd here, which is, again, filled with the charming illustrations you see behind me right now, for example. And then the second one is A Looking Glass World, which is about a tragic romance story set in the cusp of the Boxer Rebellion at the turn of the century in 1900. Both of them very rich in Tianjin history. And again, thank you so much for being with us today. We will, of course, put the recording of this video both up on YouTube as well as Bilibili for your later review. And we hope that you can join us again. And to our Sohu friends on the Sohu side, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that in the future we can do events similar to these in the future. I think if everyone don't mind, we'd like to again to thank all of the VIPs in attendance today, especially Feng Laoshi and Xinran, and I think Katie might have lost connection slightly. Oh, Katie, back! Yeah. Yay! Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for attending with us today, and thank the Sotheby's Institute of Art for all your hard work on your side.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the hosting, everybody. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
I'd like to give a special thanks to Yang Laoshi, the assistant to Feng Laoshi. She's been quite instrumental in making a lot of this happen. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, hopefully will join us again this time, next time. And I'm just gonna, and we're looking to host similar events soon. Our next one is probably going to be one centered around the International Day of Translation near the end of September. We're still working on it, but if you follow us on our socials at sinoistbooks.com, at Sinoist Books, and then or at sinoistbooks.com, our website, there's a newsletter there. We'll keep you updated on the events as they happen. So yeah, thank you so much all, and I guess we'll see everyone later. Bye for now.